he wasn't just a mobster. He was the Mafia's most terrifying hitman. Investigators estimate Roy DeMeo killed between 150 and 200 people and made most of them disappear forever. He turned a quiet Brooklyn bar into a butcher shop. He ran a stolen car empire, worked directly for Paul Castellano, and when things got messy, he chopped bodies up like pieces of meat. So how did he get away with it for so long? Local car theft units and the FBI initially ignored organized crime murders until bodies were traced to the Fountain Avenue dump. But how did New York's finest miss the clues hidden in the stolen cars and butchered bodies? This is the story of how an ordinary kid became the Mafia's murder machine. Roy DeMeo grew up with every chance to go straight. His mother wanted him to become a doctor. His family had connections in law enforcement. But by the late 1960s, DeMeo had made his choice. He wanted to be a criminal. He started as a delivery boy and worked part-time as a butcher. Those early days learning to cut meat would teach him skills he'd later use in ways no one could have imagined. Then he moved into street crime and never looked back. DeMeo wasn't happy just being another street thug. He wanted more than petty crime and quick cash. He craved the respect and power that came with being a made man in the Gambino family. This wasn't just about money for DeMeo. It was about status. It was about becoming someone who mattered in the criminal world. He started building his criminal empire with the basics. DeMeo ran loan sharking operations across Brooklyn. He charged brutal interest rates to desperate borrowers. When they couldn't pay, he used violence to collect. He also ran illegal gambling operations. These businesses looked legitimate on the surface, but they were the perfect training grounds for someone with bigger ambitions. DeMeo expanded into car theft next. This operation became highly sophisticated. The crew knew exactly what kind of cars to steal. They fulfilled specific orders for luxury models like Cadillacs and Lincolns. These cars were either given new identities or broken down in chop shops for parts. Cars were often worth more for their spare parts than as running vehicles. The profit margins were huge. Then DeMeo met the man who would change everything. Nino Gaggi was a captain in the Gambino crime family. Gaggi saw something special in DeMeo. He recognized his ruthless business sense and his willingness to do whatever it took to succeed. Gaggi brought DeMeo into the operation. He placed him on the first rung of the Mafia ladder as an associate. This partnership gave DeMeo new opportunities. He could increase his wealth through various schemes. He had protection from a powerful crime family, but most importantly, he was now on the path to becoming a made man. Gaggi saw DeMeo's potential and became his mentor in the criminal world. DeMeo's entrepreneurial spirit led him into darker territory. He got involved in hardcore adult films. At the time, this was completely illegal. Some family bosses frowned upon it. The Gambino family leadership didn't like associates dealing in adult films, but DeMeo saw it as a lucrative opportunity. The money was too good to ignore. Gaggi turned a blind eye to DeMeo's pornography business. The profits were excellent. DeMeo was making serious money from these operations, and any Mafia boss would want someone generating that kind of cash. Gaggi knew DeMeo's various criminal enterprises were a perfect match for the Mafia's activities. The loan sharking, gambling, car theft, and pornography were all profitable, but they weren't enough to get DeMeo what he really wanted. He needed to show he was willing to cross lines that other criminals wouldn't cross. He needed to prove he would do anything for the family. But success in illegal businesses came with deadly risks. The more money DeMeo made, the more people knew about his operations. And some of those people were becoming serious problems. One business partner threatened to destroy everything DeMeo had built. July 1973 marked the moment Roy DeMeo discovered he had a taste for murder. His pornography business was making excellent money. The profits were rolling in faster than he had ever imagined. But success brought a deadly risk that DeMeo hadn't anticipated. Paul Rothenberg was DeMeo's business partner in the operation. Rothenberg knew everything about DeMeo's involvement in the illegal business. He knew the locations, he knew the suppliers, he knew how much money was changing hands. Most importantly, he knew DeMeo was the man behind it all. Rothenberg became a liability. DeMeo realized his partner could destroy everything he had built. If Rothenberg talked to authorities about DeMeo's involvement in the adult films, it would expose DeMeo's entire criminal empire. The Gambino family already frowned upon associates dealing in pornography. Getting arrested for it would end any chance DeMeo had of becoming a made man. DeMeo made his decision. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of anger. This was cold, calculated business. Rothenberg had to die. DeMeo weighed his options like he was planning any other business transaction. He considered the risks, considered the benefits. He decided murder was the only solution. DeMeo planned and executed his first murder with the methodical approach that would become his trademark. He chose the time carefully. He chose the location in a quiet part of Brooklyn, where he made sure there would be no witnesses. DeMeo approached the killing like he approached his other criminal ventures. He wanted to minimize risk and maximize his chance of success. The murder itself was quick and decisive. DeMeo didn't make it complicated. He killed Rothenberg and disposed of the body whole. There was no drama. There was no unnecessary violence. DeMeo treated it like any other business problem that needed solving. The body was never found. Something changed in DeMeo after Rothenberg's death. He discovered he had a natural talent for killing. More importantly, he realized he didn't feel guilty about it. Other criminals might struggle with taking a life. DeMeo felt nothing but satisfaction that he had solved his problem. This murder opened doors for DeMeo within the Gambino family. The killing proved his loyalty to the organization and earned him credibility with Nino Gaggi. It showed he was willing to do whatever it took to protect his interests. Family leaders noticed that DeMeo could handle the dirty work without hesitation. This made him invaluable to them. DeMeo's growing involvement in car theft created more opportunities for violence. The car theft operation was becoming more sophisticated. The crew was stealing specific vehicles on order. They were chopping up expensive cars and selling the parts. This business brought in huge profits, but also created more witnesses. Witnesses were problems that needed solving. DeMeo now had a proven method for dealing with these problems. He had crossed the line once with Rothenberg. Crossing it again became easier. Each subsequent murder felt more natural to him. DeMeo began to see murder as a business tool. It was no different from loan sharking or gambling. When someone threatened his operation, he eliminated them. When someone knew too much, he killed them. Murder became part of his standard operating procedure. The psychological impact of that first kill was profound. DeMeo had discovered something about himself that most people never learn. He was capable of taking a life without remorse. More than that, he was good at it. But being good at murder was only part of the equation. To become truly dangerous, he would need the right people and the perfect place to operate. DeMeo found his first key recruit in Christopher Rosenberg, a 24-year-old fast car enthusiast whose real name was Chris Harvey. Rosenberg had a vicious temper and loved fast cars. He also used drugs regularly, but what made him valuable was his complete devotion to DeMeo. Rosenberg idolized his boss and wanted to be exactly like him. This hero worship created both DeMeo's most loyal soldier and later his biggest liability. Rosenberg would do anything DeMeo asked without question. He viewed DeMeo as a father figure, mentor, and boss all rolled into one. But his admiration also made him reckless. Rosenberg wanted to prove himself worthy of DeMeo's respect. This desire would eventually lead to serious problems. DeMeo found the perfect base of operations in Brooklyn. The Gemini Lounge sat on Flatlands Avenue. This quiet bar would become the epicenter of his criminal empire. The lounge was described as a neighborhood watering hole. It was the kind of place where a man could stop for a drink after work. Nothing about it seemed suspicious. The Gemini Lounge was ideal for DeMeo's operations for several reasons. The location was perfect. The bar sat in a quiet area where people minded their business. The layout gave DeMeo everything he would need. Most importantly, the legitimate business front provided perfect cover for his criminal activities. DeMeo expanded his criminal enterprise from this base. The lounge became much more than just a meeting place. It served as a headquarters for the car theft operation. The crew planned their jobs here, they divided up the profits, they also used it to launder money. The other crew members each had specific roles. Freddie DeNone was the professional getaway driver with skills as a race car driver and car thief. Joey Tester and Anthony Center worked so closely together that people called them the twins. Each member brought something different to the operation. DeMeo built a well-oiled criminal organization around these specialists. The crew members were united in their admiration for him. They saw him as their leader in every sense. This loyalty made the crew extremely effective, but it also made them dependent on DeMeo's leadership. In 1972, DeMeo achieved something remarkable that showed his entrepreneurial drive. He got himself elected to the board of directors of the Brooklyn Credit Union. This gave him access to legitimate financial institutions. He used his position to embezzle and launder hundreds of thousands of dollars from the credit union. Then he walked away before the investigations could stick. This showed how DeMeo could infiltrate legitimate businesses for criminal purposes. The Gemini Lounge was transforming into something far more sinister. What started as a simple headquarters was becoming something much darker. The crew was handling bigger jobs. They were taking more risks. They were also creating more problems that needed solving. More witnesses knew about their activities. More people could identify crew members. More potential problems were emerging that threatened the entire operation. DeMeo needed a way to deal with these problems permanently. The Gemini Lounge became the perfect headquarters because its rear apartment provided complete privacy for DeMeo's most brutal work. The apartment behind the bar gave him a place where he could handle sensitive business without interruption. The legitimate bar business provided the perfect cover for whatever happened in that back room. DeMeo was about to put his early training to its most horrific use. The apartment behind the Gemini Lounge became the birthplace of what would be known as the Gemini Method. In 1975, associate Andre Katz got into trouble with the police. Katz was a small-time criminal who worked with DeMeo's crew. Police had arrested him on minor charges, but DeMeo feared Katz might become a rat and decided he had to die. This wasn't unusual for DeMeo. He had killed before when people became problems, but killing Katz wasn't enough. DeMeo needed to make sure the body would never be found, never identified, never traced back to him. This murder would signal something larger than anything police had seen before. DeMeo needed a better solution than simply leaving bodies behind. DeMeo drew on his training as an apprentice butcher to solve this problem in the most horrific way possible. He realized he could use his skills to make bodies disappear completely. Instead of leaving corpses for police to find, he would cut them up like pieces of meat. This would make identification nearly impossible. The dismemberment process DeMeo developed was systematic and brutal. The method involved a specific sequence of actions that showed his complete disregard for human life. First, he would shoot the victim in the head, then stab them in the heart to stop the blood flow. Next, he would let the blood drain for exactly 45 minutes. Finally, he would meticulously cut up the body using his butcher's training. DeMeo performed this work in the rear apartment behind the Gemini Lounge. The apartment gave him complete privacy. He could take his time with the process. No one could see what he was doing. No one could hear what was happening. The location was perfect for this gruesome work. The crew disposed of body parts in garbage bags at the Fountain Avenue dump. This dump had a special area for meat byproducts from local butcher shops and restaurants. The body parts mixed in with legitimate meat waste. They became nearly impossible to identify. The dump workers treated them like any other meat scraps. The Katz murder behind Queen's Pantry Pride Meat Market made headlines when his thigh with a tattoo was mistaken for meat. This horrific detail showed just how effective DeMeo's method had become. Police failed to link the dismemberment to organized crime at the time. They didn't understand what they were dealing with. This method became DeMeo's signature technique. It allowed him to make people disappear completely. Victims would simply vanish without a trace. Police had no bodies to investigate. Families had no remains to bury. People just stopped existing as far as the outside world knew. DeMeo's dismemberment skills became so refined that even Gambino boss Paul Castellano called on his services. Castellano recognized the value of DeMeo's unique abilities. Other criminals could kill, but DeMeo could make people disappear forever. This made him extremely valuable to the family leadership. The dismemberment process became a sadistic ritual for DeMeo and his crew. It went beyond the practical need to dispose of bodies. The crew members took pleasure in the work. They treated it like any other job. They joked and laughed while cutting up human beings. Their methods were so effective that police couldn't connect disappearances to murders. Their techniques would soon be used on a wide scale. But success in the murder business created its own dangers. The more people DeMeo killed, the more his crew members knew about his methods, and some of those crew members were about to make mistakes that would threaten everything. Chris Rosenberg's reckless ambition would prove fatal for everyone involved. Sometimes the people closest to you become the biggest threat to your survival. DeMeo learned this lesson the hard way in 1977. By then, he had achieved his dream of becoming a made man in the Gambino crime family. His crew was taking freelance murder contracts from anyone willing to pay. They had earned the nickname Murder Machine throughout the underground criminal world. But Rosenberg made a catastrophic mistake that threatened everything they had built. Rosenberg was DeMeo's most trusted protege. He had been with the crew for years. He idolized DeMeo and wanted to be exactly like him. But his hero worship made him reckless. He wanted to prove himself worthy of DeMeo's respect at any cost. Rosenberg got involved in a drug deal with Cuban traffickers in Florida. The deal went wrong in every way possible. 3 Cubans ended up dead. This wasn't just a business dispute, it was a potential war waiting to happen. The Cuban drug traffickers were extremely dangerous. They had connections throughout Florida and New York. They also had the resources to fight back against the Gambino family. What made matters worse was that Rosenberg had used the name Chris DeMeo on tape during the deal. This terrified the Cubans because it directly connected DeMeo to their murdered associates. The Cuban bosses now knew exactly who was responsible for killing their people. This put DeMeo in an impossible position. The Cubans demanded justice for their dead associates. They wanted blood in return for blood. DeMeo had to choose between his protege and his own survival. The Cuban bosses made it clear they wanted a scalp to appease them. If DeMeo didn't give them that satisfaction, they would start an all-out war with the Gambino clan. DeMeo's paranoia was spiraling out of control during the crisis. He saw potential Cuban assassins everywhere. His fear led him to make a terrible mistake. He killed an innocent 18-year-old vacuum salesman. DeMeo mistook the young man for a Cuban assassin sent to kill him. The murder happened in broad daylight. No witnesses came forward. The community was too afraid of DeMeo and his crew to speak up. The killing showed how far DeMeo's paranoia had taken him. He was now murdering completely innocent people based on his fears. The vacuum salesman had done nothing wrong. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But DeMeo's terror over the Cuban situation made him see enemies everywhere. DeMeo made his cold calculation about Rosenberg's fate. This wasn't about emotion or anger. It was pure business survival. Rosenberg had created a problem that could destroy the entire operation. The only way to solve it was to sacrifice Rosenberg to appease the Cubans. DeMeo chose his own survival over loyalty to his protege. The killing of Chris Rosenberg was carefully planned to send a message. DeMeo wanted the Cuban drug traffickers to know he had taken care of the problem. Rosenberg was shot and killed. His body left in his car at Floyd Bennett Field. A machine gun was placed inside the car with him. This made front-page headlines across New York. The public display was intentional. DeMeo usually made his victims disappear completely using his methods, but this time was different. He needed maximum visibility because Rosenberg had used DeMeo's name on tape. The headlines served as proof to the Cuban bosses that DeMeo had fulfilled his part of the deal. The war was avoided because DeMeo had given them their scalp. But these escalating murders were creating problems DeMeo hadn't anticipated. The more bodies that piled up, the more attention his operation was attracting from the people who had the power to destroy everything he had built. even the most careful killers eventually make mistakes that bring down their entire empire. For years, law enforcement agencies failed to connect DeMeo's disappearances to organized crime. The FBI wasn't interested in local car thefts. Police didn't see the patterns in the missing persons cases. This lack of coordination gave DeMeo years to operate without interference. But in 1980, a customs official spotted something suspicious at the docks. He found a consignment of stolen cars destined for Kuwait. The cars had falsified registration documents. This discovery triggered an investigation that led to a warehouse filled with stolen cars ready for export. Fingerprint evidence at the warehouse directly tied to DeMeo's crew. This finding transformed the case from local disappearances into international crime. Detective Joe Wendling finally made the crucial connection that other investigators had missed. He realized that people were disappearing around the same time cars were being stolen. Wendling connected disappearing car thieves to missing persons cases, and those missing persons cases to the DeMeo car theft ring. This created the first real breakthrough in the case. The Kuwait car shipment discovery attracted attention from multiple agencies. In 1982, prosecutor Walter Mack formed a new task force. This task force brought together federal, state, local, and city investigators. Mack was determined not to let DeMeo escape justice. This collaborative approach pooled resources and expertise from different agencies. The task force used pressure tactics and surveillance to try to crack DeMeo's organization. They watched the Gemini Lounge constantly. They followed crew members around the city. They put pressure on associates to make them nervous. The goal was to make DeMeo and his crew make a mistake or provide information. The crucial breakthrough came when Vito Arena became an informant. Arena was an associate of the DeMeo gang. He testified to every homicide and provided inside information about the chop shops. Arena gave specific details about body disposal locations. His information was instrumental in linking the murders to the car thefts. Arena led investigators to Joe Scorney's body in a cement-filled barrel at the bottom of a lake. Scorney's body was found exactly where Arena said it would be. This proved his information was accurate and reliable. Detective Wendling confronted DeMeo directly at the Gemini Lounge. He offered DeMeo a deal to cooperate with law enforcement. Wendling knew DeMeo was involved in numerous murders, and he believed DeMeo could provide valuable information to police. But DeMeo refused the offer. He told Wendling, quote, "I'm a good soldier. I'm in the mob, and when they call me, I'll go out like a good soldier." The mounting evidence and pressure from multiple law enforcement agencies created an inescapable net around DeMeo's operation. The investigation was closing in on him. Law enforcement was determined to expose the full extent of his criminal empire. Refusal to cooperate would soon prove to be a fatal mistake. The investigation reached its climax when DeMeo himself became a victim of the violence he had perfected. In January 1983, DeMeo was found dead in the trunk of his Cadillac. The car was dumped behind Varuna Boat Club in Brooklyn. He had been shot multiple times. The killer was likely Paul Castellano, his own Gambino family boss. Castellano ordered DeMeo's death because he had become too much of a liability. Law enforcement was closing in on the operation. DeMeo's potential to become an informant threatened the entire Gambino empire. His death cut short a pending trial under RICO conspiracy. Law enforcement had finally closed in only after his disappearance. His legacy remains one of the darkest chapters in organized crime history. He turned murder into a business and left behind an estimated 200 victims whose families will never know what happened to them.